Hi, and welcome to this week's podcast, News from the Real World, where we talk about 10 of the most important articles that came up this week in the blog. I'm Jeremy. I'm a technical direction major.
Hi, I'm Chase. I'm a first-year TD.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm also a first-year TD.
I'm Allie. I'm a first-year stage manager, production manager.
And this week, Allie, you want to start off with your article?
Sure. I also just realized that I said it was a first year. That's incorrect. I'm a second year. Woo! Off to a good start. Okay, so first article is Netflix is reportedly testing Choose Your Own Adventure TV from Jezebel.com and written by Hazel Sills. It's a very interesting article talking about how their new show, Maniac, is kind of like I don't even know if I would say choose your own adventure, but it's like, it's that type of style.
It's interactive. You have some determination
That's
of it.
the thing. I think it's more interactive, but it's an interesting, and anyway, so they just kind of evaluate that and how Netflix is kind of like the first thing to do this on like a TV platform. But it's interesting to be like, well, isn't live theater this all the time though? So it's not
as much of like the choose your own adventure of like the original books that were choose your own adventure where you'd read to a certain point or like 4 pages and give you like 4 options of like, do they go down the dark scary mine or do they go, do they take the car away?
So what is it then?
No, I think that's more what it is.
Article.
I think the way I was describing it is not quite as theater. Like I don't think it's quite theater. But it's more the choose your own adventure. I think is an interesting aspect because it means they're leaving a large determining factor of like all the cuts and edits and things to you as the person. Like they've got to be seamless in their cuts, depending on how the transitions go, for your choice to be interactive there.
And it's interesting. Even like this is a very short article. And it says even like the full extent to which interactive TV will descend on Netflix is unclear. So they don't really know where this is going. What they have used though is they've used like the data mining that Netflix uses anyway to kind of say like, oh, people want this type of thing. Yeah. Where they get to choose how it.
Which is probably the more important part of it for them as a company.
Yeah.
Right.
Because then they can sculpt their shows that they make that tend the majority of what people want in those stories.
But the article was super negative about it, wasn't it? It was, why is this happening? This is so terrible, which I thought was kind of strange.
Right. It is a very interesting tone that he takes on that.
It is very interesting, though. I know several people, several sound designers in Chicago that actually have, because of this, they are calling several meetings where they're calling a bunch of sound designers in the area, in the region, to have a session talking about creating sound designs for choose your own adventure style theater.
That is a really interesting thought.
So they're going to have like ways that the audience can pull in, like so it'll be like a pause with the narrator and pull in to choose your choice, and then they go off in that direction of the story, of telling the story, and how the sound design changes and modifies with that.
Interesting.
I think it's also interesting. You can bring up the idea of like the artistic content too, of being like people get to choose like even just choosing a path you might not know what, like how does that change the story with that interaction in it? Does it make it like a less clear artistic vision? I think it's a really interesting thing to think about as well.
It's going to definitely make people have to have a much more concrete and thought through plan of the story, I think, or essentially the script, because jumping in you have to make sure details are not lost in a storyline that then can become relevant in another. That's one thing I didn't really like about the choose your own adventure novels when they came out, because I always the cheaper ones, or the ones that weren't the greatest ones, like I would always get trapped in a loop of like, I want this choice to happen, and then they're back there, and then like, no, I want that one choice that causes it to be cyclical.
You're right though. It's very, because like he even ends on like a bad note. interactive TV sounds fun when applied to the right circumstances, but knowing Netflix, it could easily become just another tool in their arsenal to make shows tailored designed to viewers to only make them feel good and nothing more. And what's the fun in that? I would argue that, like, not for nothing, but I go on Netflix a lot to just kind of zone out, and I don't think that's a bad thing. And on the blog, too, there was a lot of discussion on this article about this. Like, the whole data mining, like, yeah, it can be a negative thing, but I honestly feel like it's more... With Netflix, I don't mind it as much, because I want them to tell me what they think based off of what I have.
Because you're getting direct feedback of what they are using, and in that moment, what they're using it for.
And it's, like, directly affecting, like, it's...
Your experience.
Right, and it's going to ostensibly, like, better my experience, right? And I don't have to choose it. Like, if they're like, based on this, you should watch this. I don't have to choose that. But, like, just the idea that there are suggestions that are along, you know, the similar vein and have, like, the keywords that would describe this other show help. I find data mining more offensive, like, on Facebook. Or, like, Pandora. When Pandora, like, comes up with ads that I'm like, what? Why would you think that I would be into, like, oh, because I Googled that one thing for
that class?
Right, for a class or for a show or for, oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't want to see those advertisements for those things on my Facebook wall.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's interesting, but the writer is super negative.
But you know, along with that line with the new creative thinking that they're doing, there was an article of "Can Creativity Be Taught?" by Mike. Why am I saying it Mike? By Mike on bigthink.com, and it goes through several different ways on how teachers have commonly approached creative thinking. And it did heavily touch on incubation as a form of, much later on down the article, it talked about teaching the incubation style of you approach the problem, you go work on something unrelated while you are still thinking about that problem, and actively, just checking back with yourself occasionally throughout the day, thinking on that problem, and then when you really sit down to find the solution, it flows a lot more naturally because you've been slowly thinking on it throughout the day. The only thing, like, philosophically that I came up to the conclusion of was I didn't know if I think creativity can be, the debate of can creativity be taught or is it something that you have to have? And I think it is something like creative problem solving or creative approaches to something can be taught. How to think of something in a creative way, but innate creativity, I think there has to be a little bit of it there to begin with, and then it can be enhanced by education. But I don't know if it can, like, in my opinion, can't be just outright taught how to be creative.
There are, and I think I must have read the wrong article, because I definitely read an article about ways in which creativity is taught and has been taught for decades.
Yeah.
And especially in the corporate world, they teach people how to use creative problem solving to...
Well, when you actually went to this article, if you scrolled down past the core article, there were more articles on creative thinking and problem solving and different approaches and things like that. So they were tied into the same
Bigthink.com.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yep. It's like that. I mean, that was just my thought about it.
Yeah.
I think people, especially in the way the education system is right now and the way that standardized testing has shaped the way that so many people are they're not being taught to think independently and to approach problems in different ways. They're taught to fill in a bubble, to solve it the way that is prescribed to them.
Cookie cutter solutions.
So I think, like, in certain circumstances, creativity can and must be taught.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it kind of, I understand what you're saying with, like, kind of
creative
the,
problem
like,
solving versus creativity.
yeah, like the avenues to, like, think creatively and stuff. But I think in my perspective, it's like some people are naturally creative, but I also think you can take a naturally creative person who isn't taught any of those avenues, or you could take someone who maybe doesn't have, like, that natural spark for creativity, but if you teach them all those avenues, they could end up being just as creative or less. I think it's one of those things of like, even like with carpentry, like maybe you're a great natural carpenter or maybe you're not, but if you keep practicing and you work on it, I think you can still achieve, maybe not in the exact same way, but you can still achieve a significant amount of creativity in just working those processes into how you think.
Developing it as a skill.
Also thinking of the range of what creativity is in each aspect of what we do in a day. There's different forms of creativity. Like there's creative problem solving in tech design. There's, creative work happening by the designer themselves. There's creativity that the actor is doing in the way they're moving and motivating their body, or the way they're delivering lines. Even it's just refined. It's very broad, I think, in the way what creativity is if you really break it down. I think.
Well, and it's interesting thinking about. I kind of had like a light bulb when you said like basically our generation and how we have grown up with standardized testing and seeing it behind us and everything, and what David Bovers was talking about in class today, where it's like that kind of makes more sense now that he is seeing a rise in wanting structures because we've grown up in a time where like unless you have specifically explored the avenue of the arts or like stuff like that, which has a little bit more leeway. Even so, you've grown up in a high school or whatever where this is standardized testing, this is how you do it, like this is the format you follow, so that it's standard, so that everyone can be assessed the same way, which I get, but also it means that there's less room for creative problem solving, where he's like, we haven't always done it that way. Why do you think we should, why does it have to be done that? It doesn't. But we've grown up in a system that has actually told us that we need more structure. So I think
teaching to the test versus teaching to the subject.
Yeah.
We're just like, we're just so everyone's always told us how to do so many things that now we're just like, okay, tell me how you want this done.
Where we get into a circumstance where that's not the case, because it shouldn't have to be the case. No. But we're like, oh my God, what do we do though? We're used to structures. That's interesting. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Talking about creativity in modern day, so Leigh Silverman and Broadway's first all-female design team from The Interval talks about the production of Lifespan of a Fact on Broadway, and this is the first all-female design team that Broadway has seen, which is great and depressing.
It's taken this long.
And she, oh my God, she even says, she's like, it's great that it's now, but like, it's also awful that it's now. Like,
it's only the design team. It's not the like whole production team or anything like that. It's just the design team.
Yeah. Which is, Is that the one that Daniel Radcliffe is in? Is that that one?
I don't know.
I think it is. Right. It's not. I mean, but still, the fact that like they strove and like it's not easy.
Right.
They did.
And these are all really talented people. I mean, Mimi, the scenic designer there. I worked with her when I was the TD at Opera Saratoga, and incredible design. But like these are all really strong and really driven women. And I think like we had talked last week about some of the women in those roles, is they have to be driven to be the people at the forefront. Those 7 women that were, the 7 women in theater article that came up like 2 or 3 weeks ago, was really heavy into that. Like you have to be really headstrong and driven in order to be one of the leaders in your field. But yeah, I agree that it's really sad that it's taken this long to get there.
Right.
What do you think about the venue? Why it's in Studio 54, which is obviously it's a big venue with a lot of history behind it. I was wondering if any of you had any thoughts on that, because I don't really know that much about it. To me, it was kind of a mythical place, and except that it obviously really exists, and now this just happens to be the place where this first all-female design team is happening.
Well, and I also think that across the country there have been many theaters or many places that have had all-female designs, design cohorts, but this is the first time at this level, at this theater in particular, that it was, and all it took was someone saying, "Oh wait, we're all females. Is this the first time this has happened?
Was it an 08 or was it a purposeful thing? I mean, was it did everyone look into the room and realize that?
No, I feel like this was a direct choice.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember where in this article I thought I read that, but I thought I read that. There was
I feel like if I'm remembering the article right, it was a kind of like, oh wait, this hasn't happened yet. We need to.
That was
right,
the realization.
Yeah. Which kind of blew. Like I read this, I saw the title, and I was like, no way.
Right?
I was like, this should be old news.
Exactly.
Like this should have happened already, and it hadn't. In one of the other articles from weeks ago, it was something about like one of the Pittsburgh theaters, a woman had become artistic director or something, and I remember commenting on it and being like, this is wonderful, but like I wish this wasn't news. And then the author wrote that in like she was like, can't wait till this isn't news, and I was like, I feel the same way, because I'm like, oh, part of me is just like, this is so great, like we're making steps forward, but then I was like, but I thought we were so much farther
I thought we were beyond this.
I was like, I feel like I'm now taking a step back to kind of catch up with the rest of the world.
I also feel that we're also in a time right now where we're hypersensitive to making note of these things and also making sure that they are happening, which is good, but it is sad that it's like, okay, can we just be done with this already? Can we like this just be standard practice and this not be a special moment that it's happened finally?
Well, but until it's standard practice, like this is still like a big deal, and until it's like, oh, you're doing the 80th show on Broadway where it's all female. Okay, well, yeah, we've seen that before. Like until it's that, it's gonna be newsworthy.
Yeah.
We did a production of Top Girls in Boston in 2014, and the director wanted an all-female design and production team, actually. She wanted everything to be all-female, and it was interesting that, not that we got pushback from the theater, because we didn't at all. They were like, yes, we are supporting you in this. But then it was a little tricky to not to find the people, because they were certainly there, but to tell the usual person that you would hire as scenic designer or whatever, to be like, hey, we're not going to hire you for the show because we're actually doing an all-female, and they're like, wait, what? Why is that necessary? And we're like, because we want
and you're
to.
like, I'm sorry, how many all-male teams have you worked on? It's just until it becomes standard. But I wonder now that I'm like, oh great, they did it once. And I'm sure it won't be as advertised when it happens the second or the third time. But I really do wonder how much time will elapse until, because there's such a disproportion in the industry too, and some areas are better than others, but it's so disproportional that even if you were just randomly choosing design teams, it would take a lot to get an all-female design.
At what point does it, can it happen without it being an intentional choice in making it happen? I think is the question on that, but
Yeah, so I don't have a good transition.
no segue here. But.
I was actually, as we were talking through this, I was like, this might actually go better into that one.
Oh, well. So my article is Kent State Cancels West Side Story Over Casting Complaints by Kansas City News, written by Lisa Gutierrez. And basically, Kent State was doing West Side Story for their musical, and they cast non-Hispanic students as their lead roles, and then the Hispanic students were obviously upset, and it kind of just goes into this whole article. I was a little disappointed that the students felt like they had to justify themselves and being like, no, I didn't just want the lead role, there is a problem here, which is sad. So as the title implies, they did cancel it and they replaced it with a different musical and recasted all the parts.
Which is an interesting solution.
Yeah. But especially in the region that it is, where there is a large enough diversity of people to fill all those roles properly. I can understand if you're, in, the bushwhacking areas of Canada and there's no one of Hispanic origin in the town. First off, I would suggest doing a different show rather than just trying to get away with doing West Side Story. But at that point, making some exceptions in the casting at that point. But when there's the availability to cast it correctly.
Yeah, when your understudy for the lead is a Hispanic woman, then
that's,
there's issue. And this is such a complicated issue because, you can say, oh, well, they should have chosen another story to begin with. And, in any of those, in areas where there's not as much diversity, you can say that, but then we fall into the cycle of being underrepresented playwrights are now not getting more representation because their work can't be represented appropriately in those communities, which is so frustrating, and I don't think there's any good solutions for it, but it's so important that we talk about it.
Yeah, there's something in that article also that I noticed that I was irritated by. It's one of the last quotes from students or whatever is, yes, the student said, dumping a West Side Story was, quote, bowing to racists. And it was basically about, there have been and will continue to be productions of West Side Story that use colorblind casting. I think if the lead can be suspended for good production, there is no issue. I take issue with that.
Yeah.
Colorblind casting doesn't exist. Yeah. It doesn't.
And what this student seems to be saying, and I absolutely no interest in accusing the student of anything. I think it's just some growth and understanding is needed in this situation, is that acknowledging this sort of issue and saying that, look, it's problematic, if not totally wrong, to do this sort of thing and to cast white actors in roles that should be for Hispanic students is racist, and calling that out, which is a bit of a strange way to think about it.
Well, I think because Kent State, this isn't just a theater. This is a bigger, your population, if you do not feel that it can be accurately represented, which clearly is false because they had the students to fill these roles, but if you don't feel it can be accurately represented, then you need to, as a university, as a school, you need to up your diversity. That's not I don't know.
You think as an educational institution that they would be more conscious of these sorts of things. If a theater company does it, it's oh, well, it's a small controlled group, but how many people must have talked about this to make it, to bring it to campus and stuff.
Yeah. And in terms, for a theater company, well, actually, that's going to segue perfectly. For a theater company, you can, say, oh, it's casting, but if you're talking about, a whole university, no, that's, I don't think it's justified either way, but,
I think it just kind of demonstrates the,
bigger
ingrained, problems we have just societally of trying to, maneuver that and being oh, yes, it's okay, and then being no, we definitely made a mistake in trying to get people on the same page.
I'm going to take that segue.
And Ryan, hold on. Before you do that, there's an article that was... I know, I ruined your sentence. But there's an article... I know. There's an article posted this Monday on this, which talks about that the lyricist for this dismisses all the issues that are being brought up by this of colorblind casting for this particular show in this instance. So it's a very good article to get a different perspective of what the person is saying about it, who wrote the words. I'm not saying that they're right, but I think this is further feeding into the frenzy. And it's currently we'll probably end up talking about it next week too.
Interesting.
But I think it's a good read to continue reading on this subject.
Yeah.
But
back to my segue.
Back to your segue.
Back to your perfect segue.
This is an article on rescripted.org. There is no article printed out, sadly, or not article. author printed on the.
I was like, what?
So I don't know who that is by, but it's called Drury Lane Does Not Have a Casting Problem. It's in response to a review by Kelsey McGrath, talking about institutionalized racism in theatrical institutions in Chicago in particular, though I think it's kind of ubiquitous as we're getting into. And it's basically saying, how many people of color are actually on staff in these theaters, and how much of, what is happening is, in terms of like trying to produce more diverse, racially diverse shows, is white people doing it, and it's kind of weird. And there's this really powerful statement: proximity breeds empathy, proximity breeds understanding, proximity breeds awareness. So, it's just that people aren't bringing things in, aren't getting things close enough to actually like understand them and be able to,
or for long enough, like they say, like. And I think that actually kind of ties the three of those in really nicely. It's like you can't just do it once and be like, oh, that's great, that was like a novelty, and then move on.
Yeah.
You can't have an all-female design team and then have that, like, okay, now we're set for the next 10 years. You can't bring in just a director and a group that has these really new ideas, but still not have any change in the board,
Yeah.
Well, and I also think that when you're trying to do a show that is obviously not the culture or the ethnicity that the people are that are trying to produce it, as a designer and as what we can do on the tech side to make sure that it's supported properly is we have the power to say, no, I'm not going to design that show. You should find someone that should, someone of that culture that is, that does design to design that show. And, from our side, that can help push, the culture to be more inclined to do that automatically.
What was a bunch of Hollywood actors? Oh my gosh, I'm gonna get this so wrong. They, it was like right after the Oscars, and there was like a big push. Oh my gosh, why am I not remembering this? There was a big push to represent diversity and women in the industry, and other actors who were, men or, not like white, were like, we're gonna stand with you and push for that. Not writer. What was it? Anyone else remember this? No?
I remember it, but I don't remember contextually
Yeah.
what it is.
Which is, I think, it's an interesting, to say, no, I'm not doing this, you should find someone who would be appropriate.
Who's closer to it,
Yeah, it's great if you are in the position to do that, like financially, but so important to have, I think, to treat it as like genuinely wanting to diversify the work you're doing and diversify like your staff members and like the actors you're hiring. I think if you actually want to do it and not treat it like a novelty or like a, well, we have to check this mark in the box, which I hate when you get that feeling from productions. I think you really have to, whether it's just consulting or members of your team, obviously members of your team is the ideal solution, but if that's not a possibility, you need to be consulting people who like this work is like prevalent to, and like even I bet a lot of like authors and stuff who like works aren't as produced as much would love to have input and would love to inform theaters who are willing to like do their shows. And I think getting those people in and getting them in early in the process can really help drive where your show will go and help like in later stages kind of incorporating like what you're really trying to do if you genuinely want to do more diverse works.
Can I say something that's a little bit uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Everyone, I just want to point out, everyone in this podcast is at least white passing, and it's a little bit uncomfortable to begin with for all of us to be having all of these like really intense discussions about institutionalized racism and stuff like that without ever having been at the sharp end of the stick.
Yeah.
I just think that.
Yeah, and on this podcast we try to keep as diverse of a group as possible.
I mean, there's for sure some logistical issues,
right? There's always logistical issues.
But I think it's important to say that we
Yeah.
are saying this from that perspective, and there's a limit.
For those of you who are listening and not watching, you can see that.
Yeah.
But
either way,
yeah,
to acknowledge the elephant
of course,
in the podcast.
I agree.
Yeah, for sure.
Great.
Don't worry, because it's not going to be as uncomfortable as the next thing we're going to talk about. So.
Okay, so following Kevin Spacey controversy, the Old Vic announces the Guardians Network to improve workplace culture. This was by BWW News Desk, and there is no author on it, but News Desk?
Yep.
I said
Yeah.
that. But thank you.
My vision's not that good.
Basically was talking about how the network is trying to like train people to bring in to the companies and kind of like act as like a mediator and like basically trying to improve relations and make up for this whole controversy that has been.
Can you really make up for it though?
Oh, absolutely not. But they are trying to bring people in and try and improve their workplace culture. And
I do have to say this picture of Kevin Spacey makes me so uncomfortable to this day. Anytime I see it, just because of all the issues surrounding him and the things that he has done. It was just.
I think even going off of the last one, the commitment to improve is great, and like I'm glad that is happening. But yeah, the whole like, and I didn't mean to just like be like, no, it's not gonna be as bad as this, because like how the hell do you compare
Two different things? Yeah.
Racism and sexual assault? Acknowledging, right, what happened. And like you have to improve, because like what are you gonna go back and repeat the same mistakes? Please God, don't.
I think at least it seems very something, I don't know, but it also seems like they're not trying to hide from it, which is a very corporate thing to do, is to sweep it under the rug as soon as possible and move on. But I think this is, and as to whatever degree it is possible to actually face something like this head on and not seem, I don't know what I'm trying to get at, but they're at least saying, look, this thing happened, it's our fault, this is a bad place, we're gonna try to make it not a bad place.
Yeah,
having recognition of it and trying to improve past. I think that's the best summation for that. But
it's sad that they're having to be reactive as a company instead of proactive.
Yeah.
Which is causing. Granted, a lot of other companies are learning the lesson and now being more proactive about it, which is good.
Which is the good lesson.
We're starting, to as an industry at least.
Hopefully, it's not just now we have to, for like media
check
purposes.
That box.
Yeah,
yes.
Again with the checking boxes. If it's genuine change, I think that's a great thing. If it's not, if it's oh man, we have to try and look like we're fixing things, which.
Well, but I think you bring up a good point where like, I feel like the checking of the box would be, we're doing this to make it better. But I feel like the genuine is, we messed up. This happened, and it happened here, and we messed up. We're going to make it better. And, like, I feel like that is a very corporate thing to do, to just, like, kind of sweep it under the rug and be like, but we're doing all these good things to make it better. Which has to come from not wanting to damage the image. But, like, it seems, at least from the 4 people in this room, it seems like it's actually making the image worse to not admit fault.
Yeah.
You know, like...
Yeah. And it seems like by saying, like, this is a workplace culture issue, they are admitting complicity and, you know.
Yeah.
And moving on,
So,
I think.
speaking of how things sound... Right? That was great. Thanks. This is an article on Variety called Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga sang live for A Star Is Born. It's by Callum Marsh. This is a movie, apparently. I did not see it. So I'm a little bit lost in this. It talks a lot about sound things, which I'm also not super equipped to talk about. But anyway, the point, yeah, good choice there. I should have argued. Anyway, the point is, normally when you make a movie, everyone who is on the camera is just kind of like miming or not really singing it, and all of the sound is recorded in a studio, or at least for musical movies. With this, they actually performed everything live, and everything was recorded live on set using lots and lots of technology.
Lots and lots of fancy technology.
I didn't understand the technology either, but like it was cool that they created new systems and techniques just because of this movie, you know.
Because there's
awesome.
such an outcry in the sound community right now about outcry is the wrong term. Not that bad. Hubbub. Yes, there's a hubbub about dubbing over things, and it has to match up. And now they're like, well, our technology is getting to the point where we can do it at high enough of a quality live on set. Let's do that, Let's capture it in the moment, because then, everyone's singing full out. It gets better for everyone, because then you get the true sound of the space. You get the real reactions, and the emotion can build better in the actual performers. They're not just miming through the song. They're actually feeling it and getting into it. So I think it's going a long way to make it a lot better for everyone, and just see the qualities improve in these things. So
yeah, they did some really cool things. They, when they were getting a site ready to record, and they would go in and bring in these really fancy setups where they would basically bounce sound at different frequencies around the room and map the whole thing out, so they knew exactly what they were getting themselves into, so they could get that very high quality. And apparently there are live performance crowd scenes. They didn't actually amplify any of the performance because they didn't want the crowd to record it and then leak the song. So these performers were playing on stage just quietly themselves, and the crowd is going
staged
wild.
reaction.
It's hilarious. Like, can you imagine?
You see the applause sign just being held up.
Yeah.
Can you imagine being like an audience member being like, I can't do it. Oh, this is how it's supposed to. Oh.
I hope there was some kind of brief on that. Like, this is how it's going to be. But yeah, no, doing sweeps of the space, doing sound sweeps of the space and sampling the acoustic feedback that you get from there.
Impulse response.
Yep, impulse response. It checks the resonant frequency of sending out a known frequency and checking the resonance frequency back at a known distance, gives you the acoustic qualities and properties of the space. Then you can go into an ease model and model the space and see what you can do to change and shape the space. Sound geek kicking out there. Right? Yeah, but yeah, it's really nice that technology is much more available now, and we're actually seeing it implemented in not just the theater spaces. So.
Well, it's interesting because I think what you were saying is this is getting better. I actually think this is just getting closer to the experience you see on stage of being live and obviously it's still a movie, so you're not right there, but taking away the disconnected steps, it's getting closer to kind of experiencing it.
A little bit less process.
Yeah, and kind of more raw as we do experience it when we're sitting in a live performance.
And I think it'll also be interesting as we push to, there's this, I feel a push in the industry to start doing a few more musicals than they have been coming out with recently, or in the previous past. So I think
in
that...
theater?
No, film.
Oh, I see.
In film, musicals coming out on film, or in film, that there's going to be an increase in that, and I think with supplementing this technology into that, we're going to continue to see an increase in the way things are recorded on film.
Like Into the Woods.
Yeah,
and
Into the Woods,
okay.
Greatest Showman,
yeah.
and those types of things. So.
Yeah. So talking about new technology and how it's affecting theater. Oh, I love this so much. These smart glasses could be a game changer for hearing-impaired theater. Feet. Just left off the ER. It's fine. By Melissa Locker on fastcompany.com. Yeah, and it's these glasses that employ Google Glass to...
That's still around.
to help audiences who are hearing impaired more closely follow along and like without it taking them out of it. So like we had an article last week that talked about the one theater that was doing like the double casting and one whole class.
Super titles.
Yeah, and they also super titles, and they wanted to do the phone thing. But that even, and I think we talked about that last week too, where like that even kind of takes you out because you have to look here, you have to look here, and it's like this has it in the glasses, like very unobtrusive, but like so you can still look at the action while still.
It makes it more TV-esque of having it the subtitles as close to the action as possible, so you're not having to flip back and forth.
Right. But there was a lot that went into developing that. That's some technology that can keep up with what is happening on stage, and
right, and it like alters it as right
because you're pushing you're pushing an immense amount of data for a lot of people at tempos that are keeping with the action on stage that is variable. So it can't just be like a TV a movie where you just press play and then it runs.
Yeah. This is definitely not something that it will be available in any time soon for most places.
No.
The National Theater, yeah, sure.
Right.
They've got a budget.
London's National Theater. Right.
They probably have their own server room to run all this technology.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, 1,050 a pair.
Wow.
Oh my god. And it's just, it's very interesting. But I do think that, like, the use of technology in relation to theater is becoming a bigger thing, and it's, for the most part, in a really good way. Like, they're really helpful, progressive ways. And I think that's really important, that, like, theater and science are not so far apart, and don't have to be.
I also think with how fast technology moves, we might be like, oh, so long, like, before we could, like, envision that being something that's more tangible for, like, smaller companies. But the way technology just evolves so quickly, you never know they could be prototyping something right now, and in 2 years it could be, like, $50 a pair, and then a theater can just have them for people. And but I do, or at least with theaters I've worked at, I know that would be something they would want to invest in if it got to a more realistic level.
Right.
Yeah. Because I think
the price point is there.
Yeah, obviously the price point, but like if we could get it into a more realistic range, I do think that theaters that like kind of like have that in their mission would love to kind of use that technology.
Yeah, because assistive listening systems are not always great.
Nope.
Yeah.
It seems like a much more, much less obtrusive and much more reliable system, but I have no idea because I've never played with it.
As a horrible stage manager, though, and I'm sorry, actors who are listening, part of me was just like, what if they don't say the right words? Not even at the right time, but like, what if they don't say the right words? But that's horrible. Anyway.
Super titles are always correct. So, real quickly here, our last two articles are, the first one here is Top 3 Ways to Fight Church Tech Burnout by Justin Firesheets at churchproduction.com. And, this is written from church perspective. So there's some religious aspects to it. But the general core of it is really good, I think, of, just understand what you are wanting to do or what your purpose is there. Replenish what, you're exerting yourself, so make sure you're taking time for yourself to recharge. And then be sure to talk to people. Don't become so cyclical in your own communication that you're not communicating with people. I'm gonna keep talking here. The one thing that related to tech burnout that's not really touched on in this article very much is USITT did a study a few years ago of why TDs burn out. What is the biggest contributor to tech burnout? and they found that feelings of underappreciation or lack of thanks for what they do is the number one cause for them to go or to leave a job. If they feel appreciated and are thanked for what they're doing at a job, even if it's not the best working conditions or, they're not doing what they love or, doing the cool things, they will stay there because they're being appreciated in what they're doing. So appreciate your technical director and find some place where you're appreciated is what, I come off from saying that.
Appreciate everybody on your team.
Yes, but as far as, looking at the tech director burnout or tech people burnout, appreciate people and find a place where you're appreciated. Yeah,
that's interesting that you, I don't know, that doesn't sound like it's any different from theater, there's the religious aspect, but I don't think
other than that,
really
it's the core of your purpose and
anything.
replenish and open up.
It's a big question. What am I doing at this particular company? How does that serve what I want to be doing with my life or with whatever? And I think that's a really important thing to have in mind is when things get tough, remember what you're doing.
Right. Yeah. And why you're there, why you want to be,
why it's good.
I think a good team is really important because you could be working in a terrible theater, terrible condition, but if you're doing it with really good people, you'll be like, all right, at least we're in it together.
All right.
Yeah,
that's true.
And then finally here, last article for the day is 4 well-meaning pieces of career advice you want to ignore. This is by Thomas from Fast Company, and the suggestions are essentially ignore following your passions, ignore just being yourself, don't play to your strengths, and don't just be yourself, or don't believe yourself. And I on the surface it seems really counterintuitive, knee-jerk reaction to what he is saying. But
when he goes into it,
when you read into it, it hits home on some things. Because
on some level.
On a level, of hitting home as far as just being aware of it. Be yourself, but also be aware of how people are perceiving you.
And what other people need
and of you. But that doesn't mean don't be yourself. But that just means understand how yourself is being perceived and how your interactions with other people are affecting them.
I just think this title kind of this was basically another suggestions for how to represent yourself and how to be in the workplace, but he wanted a catchy title that would make people be what, not be myself, but it's not dismiss who you are as a person and put on this whole facade. It's you have to be aware of how you're acting and how you're interacting with people in the work environment. But
I honestly, I just don't think it's that new. I think that the things that he's arguing
No, I don't think anything in this is new. It's
I
just
think the
presentation
things
of it.
that he's arguing against are things that are kind of implicit when somebody tells you these things. Just be yourself. Okay. Obviously, you should, not pretend that you are, someone else, but you should keep in mind that you want to make a good impression. So maybe quash down your really annoying habits.
Yeah, I think this serves as a good check to the inspirational poster sitting on in your grade school classroom of follow your passions means something different, when you're young versus now, or just be yourself means something different than when you're interacting with people on a professional level.
I see. I mean, it's interesting. The follow your passions one is probably the only one that I'm okay. And he's don't only follow your passions if they align with what you're good at and are financially gonna be helpful, are gonna be successful financially. I'm okay.
Yeah, follow your passions as long as they relate to your actual skills.
Right. Which I'm gonna take it back to the first article. Can creativity be taught? If you want to do something creative, but you either have not ever been exposed to anything creative, or don't think that you're good at it, can you be exposed to it more in such a way that is helpful where you can achieve it? I don't know. And where the other thing where it's it's not as important that you believe in yourself as others believe in yourself. It's but if I believe in it, that will
affect the outcome.
That'll make others more readily like able and willing to believe in it. So like there are some points where I think he gets it right, and others that I'm like, I see where you're going, but
how you get there.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to do theater even though I know I'm not going to make money. Yeah. So who knows if I'm good at it.
Right. What is the measure of success? That's a tangent.
It's just, it's interesting.
Yeah. All right. But I think that's all for this week. Thank you for tuning in. Look forward to next week and 10 more articles. Bye.